Okay, it's levels to this. I am Sensei Hollywood. He is Fat Boy. And we're talking about Quincy Jones today.
The godfather of producers.
Produced Frank Sinatra, Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, Michael Jackson, and influenced a whole generation of producers and engineers and music in general.
Absolutely. When you talk about one person that gave the world over half a century of great and relevant music to every generation knows that music.
Like, seriously, from the 60s on, he was in the height of fame, the cultural zeitgeist. You know, when Sinatra was it, he was producing Sinatra, Ray Charles, Stevie Wonder, the biggest album for Michael Jackson. You know, he's always had his finger on the pulse, all the way to my new current favorite artist, Jacob Collier.
Jacob Collier.
Quincy Jones mentored and kind of opened a lot of doors for Jacob Collier, who's like a musical genius.
Yep, prodigy.
And he just exploded from some kid doing YouTubes to winning Grammys for Best New Record and Jazz, and just amazing all the way to 2024. Absolutely. He was influencing people.
Yeah, man. You know, you said a key thing, and that was keeping his finger on the pulse. He started with jazz, big band, rhythm and blues, pop, and dibbled and dabbled in some rock as well.
What do you suppose is the common thread with all that?
I think for him, the common thread is blues. Blues and jazz, especially blues. Blues can merge with any genre. I mean, other genres were born out of blues. So rock and roll born out of blues, rhythm and blues, the word is still in there, rhythm and blues born out of blues, and pop is born out of a mesh of all that stuff. So I think he never left the core principles of music creation, melody and rhythm. And he never left that. I think Quincy is a guy, even his Frank Sinatra productions had edge to them. They had edge, and then they had movement. And you know, for Frank and what he did, you know, it you know, there's some Frank stuff that you would frown your face about, like, oh, Frank went in on that.
well, here's the thing, right? They brought Quincy in for that song, "Fly Me to the Moon."
Fly Me to the Moon.
But that started off as a waltz called "In Other Words."
Yeah.
And they brought Quincy in to give it that swing.
Quincy had to give it the swing. Yeah.
And that's when they said, I gotta have Quincy, and that's what got you that Frank Sinatra swing.
That's right.
Kind of behind the beat.
Yep.
The band's rocking, or loosening up the tie, having a drink in the hand, you know.
Yep. Absolutely. That you know,
that partnership yielded some of the greatest music of that era.
Right.
What does that mean? What can we learn about Quincy and with that term partnership with an artist? What's the producer partnership with an artist?
It was that relationship when the artist that you're working with trusts you, trust your judgment, can leave important decisions in your hands, but at the same time, give you their take, and you will listen to them as well. That when you can build an artist's trust, that relationship between artist and producer, when that's established like that, you get those classics that you got, and I'm sure, you know, in a lot of our sessions, you've heard me say that most of these great records come from conversation. And I think that was a big part of it as well, because Quincy would a lot of artists that he worked with, just about every artist that he ever worked with, they all say working with Quincy was a lot of conversations. And from there, you know, the artist is they're thinking that, you know, all this work is about to be done. And at the end of the day, you know, Quincy's like, no, we're working right now. We're working right now because I'm getting your true thoughts on things that you want to say, or topics that are issues that are important to you. Now that I know how you look at the world, how do I find those songs? How do I find those elements to give you so your voice can be at its best?
It's a push-pull, right? It's a synergy of creative yin and yang, right? I remember hearing a story that Michael hated the strings that start off the wall.
Couldn't stand them. And Quincy fought for him, right? Because it defined the song. It was the melodic element that was a counterpoint to Michael Jackson. And listening, if you put that record on right now, and before any of us knew this story, when you heard that record, the first thing that caught your attention about the record was right. And
how could you can't imagine that song without that melodic figure.
It was the perfect setup because it was a build up. The bass line, dum 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 dum, and Michael doing the whispering, you know, got a lot of power, honey, talking about the force. And the first big noticeable, you know, trademark stamp on that record is Mike going, ooh, that's the first thing. Immediately after that, take that, put your producer hat on. As a producer, Mike comes in strong with that, woo, that lets you know something is coming. Something is coming, because that woo, you just don't woo and nothing's behind it.
Not usually, no. I'm kind of all out of woos on a daily basis, but you know.
So you just don't woo and nothing follows behind it. So imagine if Quincy lets Mike talk him out of those strings, and it's just woo. I mean, the horns do their thing, but what's moving behind that woo is it's epic.
And look what both of those things are as sonic signatures.
Yep.
You can just sing that little melody, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly. You know exactly.
How about this one? Da 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 da.
Sanford and Son. It's
or
another...
da 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 da.
Austin Powers.
Da 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 da.
And you know,
that's the theme from Kill Bill.
Kill Bill. So and you know, a lot of those great sound pieces, forever people didn't know Quincy produced those.
Right. I didn't know about the Kill Bill. That was like a theme from Mannix, some old TV show I never watched.
Yeah.
But it was such a strong sonic signature. I think the Austin Powers thing was recycled too.
I didn't know Quincy did Austin Powers, and it stood out so much because the first time you watched Austin Powers, the music caught your attention and you paid attention to that music, but even more, the choreography that they were doing to that music made you even more interested in that music, because it's like, man, they jamming to that music, but that music fits that time period and all that. And it made me do research on that Austin Powers song. And when I found out Quincy Jones produced that, it blew my mind, because most people, you know, I'm not saying, you know, to the extent that me and you are involved in music, we're going to find those things out. But the average everyday listener, what they know about Quincy Jones, and this is even after the Brothers Johnson, Chaka Khan, George Benson, Old Blue Eyes, we instantly go to Michael Jackson.
What is special about that relationship between Quincy and Michael?
Quincy was able to take Michael to the heights that Michael wanted to go. And he was able to do that by giving Michael exactly what he wanted. His vision of who he was as an artist and Quincy got out of the way of himself enough to let Michael's productions shine as well, because Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, the same song we're talking about, was a Michael production. That was a demo Michael did at the house. Half the Off the Wall album was already productions that Michael had. He played them for Quincy, and Quincy was able to recognize, like, hey, Michael, these songs are great. Let me put my Quincy on them, and we'll take them to another level. And putting the Quincy on it meant bringing in all those top-notch musicians that he brought in. Greg Fillinganes, having Bruce Swedien as the main engineer, bringing in the horn sections and all that, the string sections and all that. Quincy's ability to put all that stuff together to help Michael recognize the vision he wanted to be as an artist. And Michael was gunning for the Bee Gees.
Right.
He was gunning for the Bee Gees because the Bee Gees
disco era.
He was gunning for them because the Bee Gees were the kings of disco. And Saturday Night Fever was so hot. Saturday Night Fever was so hot, and Michael was finally hit age where he could go out to Studio 54, and every time he was out at Studio 54, the highlight of the club was the Bee Gees records, and he saw how the crowd was captivated by the Bee Gees, that sound. And not only that, he's listening to the Bee Gees music, seeing how activated the crowd is, but he's also seeing Darth Vader walk through the crowd. Which is on that same particular record. The Force is because Darth Vader used to be in Studio 54.
I did not know that.
That's where the Force comes from. Don't Stop Till You Get It. That's the Force. The Force is because Darth Vader used to be in the club. So if Darth Vader's in the club partying, he's bringing the Force with him. Don't Stop Till You Get Enough had to be a forceful song. He had to bring the Force.
Right on.
And that's where that came from. Quincy was able to get him to those heights to where he surpassed he took the baton from what the Bee Gees were doing and surpassed it.
I mentioned the word zeitgeist, like the spirit of the times, and I think Quincy, and that's a great example of it, is sort of like Miles Davis in this way. Miles always led the decade,
right.
In the way that he originated jazz fusion, and then before that it was bop and cool, all these different styles of jazz.
I think always Quincy, ahead of the curve.
Quincy had that grander notion of leading music in the cultural times, the zeitgeist.
Look at the kind of people that Quincy surrounded himself with. Old Blue Eyes, Ray Charles, Miles. Quincy was always around those innovators.
That's like Mount Rushmore level.
Yeah.
Of music.
Yeah. So when you're around those kind of people, because nobody was thinking, let's take Ray Charles. Nobody was thinking about taking the gospel sound and putting it in the secular world. That was introduced to the world by Ray Charles. It's always been a thing. It's always been there.
But to mainstream music world.
And for Ray because another, a lot of these guys, they tried what was popular at the time. Ray tried to do doo-wop, and he did everything that was popping at the time. But Ray needed something to separate him from everybody else. Same with Old Blue Eyes. Same with Miles. If you surround yourself, and Quincy being a trumpet player himself, he was already, trumpet players were the guys before guitar players were the guys. It went from
the guitar players just strumming four on the beat,
just strumming along, holding the rhythm together. So,
pretty much.
You got those guys, man. When that's your circle of friends, Old Blue Eyes, no, in big band, the only guys that could compete with Frank in that era was his guys. The
Well,
Rat
there was
Pack.
something. I sent you that article from Questlove. See, one of the quotes he highlighted from Quincy was, "Your contact list is your best instrument."
That's and that's absolutely true. I mean, the guys that Quincy learned a lot of things from Ray Charles and Miles and Blue Eyes. He learned a lot of things from them. Quincy, I believe when he started producing Frank, he might have still been a teenager.
Or was definitely young, right?
Or if he wasn't a teenager, he was in his early 20s. Now, and Frank was on top of the world. Frank had already had major hits.
Yeah, he was like a crooner. He was like a real smooth, the teenage idol of his time, right? And then this was Frank maturing as he's a grown up now.
Yep.
Where does he take the sound?
Where does he take the sound? I want to do something new. I need this young kid, Quincy. I like what he's doing. He's already innovating the big band sound. He needs to pair with a big gun like myself now. And he got with the big gun, and it created a lifelong friendship. And not only that, Frank fought for Quincy in a lot of instances, because you're talking about Jim Crow South at the time and all these things, and Frank doing certain shows in the South. They didn't want Quincy and the black members of the band in the hotel, and Frank literally would stand up for that. It's like, look, I'm not performing if Quincy and the black guys in the band can't stay in the same hotel I'm at. No show if my guys can't go.
Music as a reflection of society then was it was segregated. They used to call it race records.
Right.
Before like you were just saying, like, you got the gospel sound of Ray Charles presented to a mainstream white audience, basically.
Yep.
And then it took someone like Sinatra to stand up for Quincy and many other people in many other different ways, just to start the desegregation of music.
Yeah.
But that's what's beautiful about music, is because when you mix and match and synergize, it just naturally breaks down barriers. I got to have this guy.
Right.
It's, we can't do this without each other.
Can't do it. He's too valuable to the progression of music today. I mean, listen to what he's doing right now. If I played this song for you, you don't know who did this song, but the music is moving you to the point of you can't get enough of this music. After 5 times you listening to this record, oh my God, who is this? It's this black guy. That right there lets you know the power of music, how it breaks down barriers. Music has no face, has no color. When you listen to good rhythms, good melody, it moves you. It moves a whole nation. So at that time, when the big guns like Frank stood up for Quincy, it opened those doors for Quincy to be able to become what he became. And once that happened, it wasn't no stopping him after that.
No.
It was no stopping, and Frank helped open those doors for him.
No, definitely. You said something about how Quincy was learning from Frank, and that's, I think, something Quincy would tell everybody. You're always learning and developing. There was a quote. There was a very famous master piano instructor named Nadia Boulanger. She would teach the top level musicians, and he had a quote from her, and it was, "Your music will never be better or worse than you are as a human being."
I believe that.
It manifests in everything you do, consciously or subconsciously. I
believe that.
Where you're willing to fight for strings at a certain intro, or you're willing to give to somebody's vision, and it becomes something greater than the sum of its parts.
Oh man, the state of music today, I think it's trying to fight for that kind of stuff again now, but it went through a period where I think a lot of the artists were fighting the record being as great as it could possibly be. You know, and it's kind of like one thing I hate is it's good enough. Good enough ain't good enough. Never. Good enough ain't good enough ever. And I would say that was introduced in hip hop. As much as I love hip hop, that's where I started hearing it's good enough. I started hearing it's good enough in hip hop. Not from the guys that really kicked the can down the road. Not from them, the forefathers and the guys that came after the forefathers and the guys that came after the forefathers. This only really started happening in the last 20 years.
I mean, there have been formulaic knockoff kind of attitudes towards music forever, but you know, I hear what you're saying, especially after a burst of creativity, it kind of levels off. Hey, let's follow the script.
Let's follow the script. Yeah. And that's
that one
what I'm saying.
They made millions with that. Let's just do our version of that. Let's literally copy the beat, move 2 or 3 things, change a chord or 2, call it a day, and see what happens.
And I think music as a whole today has gotten to the bubble has popped on that notion right there, where the whole copy and paste, nobody pushing the envelope, nobody trying anything, just let's keep recycling what's tried and true. We know that works. Let's just keep making the same song over and over and over. I think another thing that has hurt, not completely, but in a sense, is music theory not being in music in a lot of ways. Because if you have music, you know, music theory, you can create whatever kind of sound you want to create because you have theory. Quincy had theory. He knew music theory.
He had an eye out for people who thought that way too. And I'm such a huge Jacob Collier fan, but Quincy's role in bringing him to the forefront was immense. He's even in one of Jacob's like little homegrown videos at one point.
Yep. I remember.
And if you don't know Jacob Collier, he's he's not a kid anymore, but he started off as a kid, music theory genius.
Yeah.
Working with polyrhythms, with really deep levels of pocket and groove, complete maestro on 4 different instruments and his voice, stretch tuning, he actually had found a way to like modulate to G1/2 sharp. He's actually got a video, so this kid is pushing envelopes and also has soul.
Yeah.
And Quincy saw that in him. Yeah. And to me, that's like that, from Sinatra to Michael Jackson to Jacob Collier, over that span of time, who's always looking for someone who has that spark, who's on the path, as he liked to say.
Yeah.
You know, that's the blending. That's, like I said, the yin yang, the push pull of the emotional and the intellectual, you know, but always bringing it back to the blues. It's 2 or 3 notes. Always. Every little musical figure in a Quincy Jones production is its own sonic signature.
It sits there by itself. It stands out.
You know, you could just break down every single part of a Michael Jackson record that he produced, and each part is like a master class.
It's doing its own thing. And again, you know, to Quincy's credit, the musicians that he would bring in, and you've heard me say this in the studio before too. I've taken several pages. Well, I've taken the whole book from Quincy. The whole book I took from Quincy, but I would assemble musicians that are producers in their own right as well, because, you know, producers can see the vision of something and not just play. And when you do that, you're able to open the door to the ideas of everybody in the room. And I don't know how many times, I mean, you know, how many times where it's, you know, you might ask, what do I want? And I might only tell you what kind of styling I'm looking for. And then I leave the rest up to you, because I know you're going to deliver that. You know what I'm looking for.
Well, it's a producer mindset versus a virtuoso mindset, or a show-off mindset, right?
Yeah.
You're playing for the song.
You're playing for the song.
So if you can build that level of trust and communication, then you don't have to say so many words.
Exactly.
And the other thing is sort of like Apple. You know, like the famous Steve Jobs used to say, people don't know what they want till you show it to them.
Right.
Having that open-mindedness and willing to develop a good idea in real time. That's the producer-artist-musician relationship.
Absolutely. I heard a story. I heard a story from what's the guitar player from Toto?
Oh, Steve Lukather.
Steve Lukather. I heard Lukather.
Yeah, one of those.
I heard a story. He was telling how human nature was created. And, you know, it was an accident. Quincy wasn't supposed to hear it, but he heard it. And, you know, whoa.
It was the keyboard player had a cassette tape of him singing it, or
right.
Something like that. Yeah.
And you know, it was a bunch of songs on the A side of the cassette. Quincy was at his desk working, and the cassette flipped over. First song on the flip side, which Quincy wasn't supposed to even hear, was what would be known as Human Nature. So Quincy puts this together. Of course, you know, Toto was a group that Quincy went to a lot for certain things, keyboard, whether it was synthesizer work or whatever.
Yeah, they were like a super group of the best LA musicians of the time, right?
Absolutely.
And they had their own hits as that super
had
group.
their own hits. So Quincy worked with them a lot, and this is what that situation was. Quincy says he's listening to it, and he says, it's too pop. I need something to you know, we wanted pop, but it still has to be in that R&B lane as well.
Right.
So he sends it to Luke. Luke's like, you know, what do you want me to? Quincy's like, I send it to you to do you. Do you. And his thinking was, you know, what's really popular in a lot of R&B tunes at the time? Muted guitar.
The plinky plunks.
And that's what he did, and you get the boom 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 boom.
Just driving the rhythm to get and the harmony together. Yeah.
He opens it up right there. Boom boom boom, and then closes it back down. And the main thing everybody notices about Human Nature is that's the given. After that, when Mike starts singing during the verses, what pops out to you is that boom 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 boom.
He finally let the guitar player in the band shine a little. It took 30 years.
let the guitar player shine.
He opened it up in the 80s, let those guitar players famously, and this goes back to his Rolodex being immense, he got Eddie Van Halen at the height of his powers to play on Beat It. Uncredited, too, at the time. It wasn't in the cassette tape as Eddie Van Halen played. So I remember getting that cassette as a kid. I'm like, dang, whoever played that solo, he's even better than Eddie Van Halen. It was Eddie Van Halen. Okay.
It was Eddie Van Halen.
At the time, I never would have imagined, because Van Halen is here. Michael Jackson is here.
Yeah.
Quincy brought him there.
With a phone call.
And
not only that, Quincy called Eddie, and Eddie hung up on him. He didn't think it was Quincy. He was like, but this is why what you're saying, that point right there is so important, because, you know, Michael's here, Quincy's here, Eddie's here, they're all up here, but in different stratospheres. And for Eddie Van Halen to get a call from Quincy Jones, and he didn't believe it was Quincy and hung up on Quincy. Quincy had to call back. No, it's really me, man. It's really me, man. You know, but for that to happen, that was, you know, it was unheard of. And the record came about because Quincy's vision for Beat It was, we need a rock hood record. Literally. We need a rock hood record. That's what Beat It is. Beat It was a hood rock record. So And the main guitars on Beat It also came from Luke. Beat It is also a creation that Michael already had, but Michael told Luke, he wanted Luke to do the don't 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 don't. It didn't move. He was the one that brought it to Michael and said, yeah. It gets a little stale. How about dun 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 dun? Michael loved it, and that was placed in the record. And see, this is the thing with all those egos in that room. All the egos stayed outside the studio door. No big egos was allowed to. And another thing, when Eddie did his solo part, Eddie went crazy on the very first tape. But those egos, Quincy's ego, Michael's ego, those two egos could clash on their own. But both of those egos got out of the way to let those players and their visions of, come on, you got Luke on one end, you got Eddie on the other end. Who's going to tell those two guys how to play guitar?
That combination of all the egos being set aside, the musical energy and synergy, bringing together the best of the R&B world and the rock world, that made a record that was open to everybody.
Everybody.
And they sold 100 million copies of it. You don't do that unless you tap into something universal.
Everybody.
Something that speaks to everybody. It's beyond genre. It's his own genre. Yeah. You know?
I remember, being a kid, you didn't hear records like that on R&B radio stations.
No.
Beat It was playing on R&B radio stations. Not only that, everybody was questioning it's Michael Jackson. How are we going to get this attempt at a rock song across the fence? Quincy Jones got it across the fence because Quincy Jones knew for this song to be taken seriously, we need Eddie Van Halen.
The best of the best. And at the height of his powers, in the early 80s, Eddie Van Halen was...
Now, to have that, you're thinking that way. For this to work, we need Eddie Van Halen. There's nobody else for us to go to. Thriller came out 83.
Yeah, so it's just before Van Halen's 1984 with Jump and everything. To my generation of guitar players, that's definitely on our Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. Man, come on, absolutely.
And to bring him into the mix with that, that's how you make 100 million selling record.
Yeah.
It's bigger than the genre. And what's cool about it goes back to the first thing you said, it's still all rooted in the blues.
It's still all rooted in blues.
You can go back and hear the blues licks.
Those chords.
You can hear the blues licks in the solo.
It's in there. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what, and arguably, blues and jazz have been said to be the only true American art forms, truly American.
Blues and jazz. Go back to the beginning of the start of the show, blues and jazz.
And that's the universal.
He was stapled in that.
There's something about where that comes from that is timeless and lasting, and
it comes from, oh man, I mean, blues and jazz was the best place to put pain, suffering, strife. It was the best place to put all these elements and get point across through that stuff. I mean, blues was born through slavery. Those blues melodies are the hymns that the slaves would sing, and jazz was born from that. And those two, like you said, blues, jazz, will ever be intertwined, and you'll hear both elements in whether whoever created it knows it or not. It's coming from that place. Pop isn't, it's a genre, but it's not a genre. It's just popular music. It's popular music. But when you listen to, when I listen to anything categorized as popular music, I hear those two styles of music that you just mentioned in everything.
A lot of, especially the British invasion groups,
Yeah.
like these guys, like going to like Beatles and Rolling Stones. Like the Rolling Stones would do pilgrimages to Clarksdale, Mississippi, to try to find the crossroads
Yeah.
where Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil for his
Robert-
musical talents. You
Robert
know,
Johnson.
legend says.
Yeah. He did disappear for a while.
Well,
When he came back, supposedly
people are saying,
he was chopping everybody's heads off with that axe.
yeah,
So-
and you know, there's something about the mystery of the music. You know, it comes from a dark place, like you said.
Yeah.
It's, you know, pain is the source of art.
Source of art. It's the source. It gets no better than that. Music comes out of pain and suffering. I got all music before blues and jazz, all music. I mean, Beethoven and Bach and all those guys, that music didn't sound happy.
You ever seen Amadeus?
Amadeus.
The full 3 hours is Mozart suffering for his
Yeah.
art.
Now you can be happy and be inspired by your happiness and do something that was a result of the happiness, but
the origin of the happiness was working through the pain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
exactly.
No. You know, and there's something, not to get too off on Mozart, but, you know, that movie, Amadeus, is told through the eyes of Salieri, who was a composer who was just kind of mid.
Yeah.
But he was competent, he was
Yeah.
hardworking, he showed up on time, but he lacked that it factor
Yeah,
that Amadeus had.
yeah.
And there's something about Quincy who has been really good through his whole life of finding people with that it factor.
He finds the it people.
That
Absolutely.
beyond just technical competence, or they look good in the suit or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, they can sing non-wrong notes. There's something beyond that has to be there for someone to be at that level,
Right.
at that Mount Rushmore level. The
He's-
complete package of
Right.
all that plus
Yeah.
it, whatever that is.
Yeah,
It's
whatever
impossible to
that is.
articulate.
Yep. Impossible to articulate. He saw it in Michael in The Wiz. When they were filming The Wiz, everybody had done their solo parts. Diana Ross, Nipsey Russell, everybody had done their solo parts. The last person to do their solo was Michael Jackson, and Quincy had yet to even write the score for Michael's solo in The Wiz. And during a break, setting up for another set, he saw Michael spinning and, you know, doing what we know.
The Michael
the Michael Jackson.
mannerisms.
Yeah. Saw him doing that stuff, and he noticed Michael. I mean, of course, he knew who Michael was, because Michael had been a star since he was 9 years old. So
But
he
he's
knew-
part of the Jackson family
Right.
and the whole, yeah.
He knew who he was. But when he saw that, the light came on, and then he knew what kind of song to give him. And he created the song You Can't Win. I think You Can't Win is the song that Michael does in The Wiz. And he saw that, hey, this kid is different. He's different. He's something else. Michael was the only person on set that knew all of his lines and everybody else's.
On top of just having that it factor, there's that work ethic.
The work
part of it,
ethic.
too.
So he knew, you know, it scenes that Michael wasn't in, he could see Michael mouthing the words.
He knew it better than everybody else.
He knew it better than everybody else. So there's that. Quincy's like, this guy's prepared. He gets himself prepared. And Michael would ask Quincy. He would try to pick Quincy's brain on stuff. And you know, leading up to that point, Quincy was like, you know, Michael was almost in the way a little bit. Like, I'm focusing on, I gotta get Diana's solo part done, and you know, I'll get back to you. But when he saw Michael spinning and twirling and doing all that during breaks, because he was very professional, he would get in the character like that. So whenever there's cut, he would spin, and you know, I guess that's he had to get that burst of energy out, you know. But when Quincy saw that, Michael actually asked him, Quincy, I'm looking for producers for my next album. Do you know anybody who's available? And Quincy was, after seeing all that, Quincy was like, I'm
Might
available.
know a guy. Yeah,
I might know somebody. And the crazy thing, when Michael chose Quincy, all the execs at the label were telling Michael, Quincy's not it. He's too jazzy, he's too this, he's too that. Michael fought for Quincy.
Maybe that's part of the it factor, that bravery to stand up to the status quo.
Yeah, you gotta be able to stand up. You gotta stand up on business, man. You got
the suits are always going to want to repeat the last thing because they want the surest thing.
Yep.
They want a return on the investment. They want a safer bet.
Yeah. Because you got to think, Quincy was in his 40s when they did Off the Wall. So they're like, no, Quincy's he's old, he's jazz, he's this, he's that. Because Quincy was 50 when he did Thriller.
Right.
He
I like that. That's one of the,
when he
that's
did
one of the
Thriller.
learnings of the whole Quincy Jones thing. He's at the midpoint of his life and still innovating.
Still
later in life, making moves.
Yeah.
I'm not bringing that up for any particular reason.
No,
but,
but it fits.
Yeah,
it
yeah,
it fits. But no, but standing up for him, fighting for him was probably the best decision Michael made at that point in his career. And even Joe he challenged Quincy and said, I don't think you can make a star than what he already is. He challenged Quincy on that. And Quincy gladly accepted the challenge. And he told Joe, yeah, we'll see. I think I can. I think I can make him a bigger star than what he already is. And we see how that ended up.
And he had the imagination or the vision to see more potential there. And that's the story of Quincy, right? Just taking a chance on even greater greatness than was all he presented with.
Yeah.
Final thoughts, man. What's the life lesson learned from Quincy Jones?
Man, I believe in yourself, believe in the process, believe in the team around you, study the greats, pay attention to the landscape going on at the time, because the way Quincy was able to slide through all these decades is he kept his finger on the pulse of what was going on in the world. So, learn your craft, build that relationship, that relationship with the artists that you're working with. Like, get to know them, who they are, what the things that they think about, how they feel about, everyday life, what's going on in the world. And you can give them what they want after that. And once you get that, after that, you can give them what they need. Quincy was able to do that. He was also a humanitarian. Let love prevail. Keep hate away.
It goes back to what I was saying on that quote. Your music's only as good as you are as a person.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think if you lose sight of that, then you're never going to have it.
That's a fact. I agree with that.
Hey, let's leave it there. That's a good level to step out on. It's levels to this, man.
It's levels. It's levels to this.
Come too far to turn back.